Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, lots of good choices here today. Let's do it. What was the scariest or weirdest thing that has ever happened to you while in a foreign country? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I got lost in an underground city in Turkey as a child. I stepped away from my parents and group to look at something, and when I turned around, they were all gone. I couldn't find anyone who spoke English for a while, until finally a man who spoke a little English helped me find my way back to the surface to wait for my parents to come back out. Thankfully, one of the women from our group was already there because she had gotten claustrophobic. Being lost was scary enough, but not being able to communicate terrified me. Then, when my parents came up, they didn't even realize I had been lost. So that became the scariest thing, realizing I wasn't exactly safe with my parents' inattentiveness. A few years back, I was in Russia. I don't recall what was the name of that place I was in, and well, if I remember it correctly, then I was in some smaller town that looked like a ghost town. You could see outside only a few people, and buildings looked abandoned. Also, almost no cars. Pretty weird and scary, but the peak was at one of the outer edges. There was a small forest and small wall in front of it. Nothing else around. Just small forest with small, clean, untouched concrete wall. And on some trees in that small forest, I saw hats just hanging from there. I sadly don't have photos of that place, but I know I will never return there. I was in Costa Rica a few months ago for a volunteer project to clean up plastics from the local area around Yaco Beach. I stayed in the Punta Leona resort as a worker, since they have a contract with the volunteer program, and on the first night, when we all went to our dorms to sleep, roughly 30 minutes into our sleep, there was an ear-splitting shriek outside of the dorm that was so loud it made the whole house rumble. I have sensitive hearing, so I was up instantly, and so were the other girls, but they were more annoyed than scared. What was that? I looked to that girl that I had been talking to the most earlier, and she waved her hand. Howler monkeys do that sometimes. Just ignore it. That scream will forever stay in my mind. It was the only time I heard it while I was there, but easily the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in a foreign country. Alright, it happened to me too. I heard a howler monkey for the first time and I thought that there was a mass murder going on, so yeah, interesting sound if you never heard it before, and you get used to it. The other scariest thing was being evacuated out of Turkey during the first Gulf War. From sitting in class and realizing the bomb drill wasn't a drill when I saw the bomb-sniffing dogs walking down the hallways, packing up what we could at home and waiting for flights out, having red alerts going off as we waited to be evacuated out. The last red alert went off as we were being bussed out to the plane. I remember them telling us to get on the floor of the bus and thinking, what's that going to do if we get hit? Not creepy, but different. Driving in Costa Rica, amazing place full of super nice people. Some of the roads were paved or hard-packed dirt. Most were ancient and in real bad shape. Biggest potholes that I have ever seen in my life. I'm not kidding when I say there were plenty of potholes 2 feet deep. I was advised to get an SUV with full insurance, which I did and was thankful for. Other interesting things, very religious country. Shrines all over the place with lights on them, in stores, on corners in the middle of nowhere. First time I saw an entire family ride on a Vespa-type scooter. Really impressive, especially on those roads. They also sold some form of moonshine on the side of the road in reused plastic bottles. 10 out of 10. Would go back. Was at the foreign airport waiting for the next flight when military coup started. Martial law was proclaimed shortly after and all airport personnel gradually left. Seemingly, this included all visible security. Few more flights landed, and people deplaned on tarmac with nobody around. They were just wandering around taxiways and somehow made it to the building. Food and drinks were removed from the lounge. Anything that could be broken disappeared too. People were grabbing few remaining water bottles, huddling together in unrelated large groups. As night came and TV screens were turned off, the anxiety rose. Lots of rumors among total strangers about army coming to block airport or government official landing at airport and making us a target for military attack, and major riots on the streets outside. Few times, some events somewhere in airport building would prompt a gasp, a bang, a startle, a scream, and soon enough, there would be a mob screaming, running in random directions. The most severe panic run was due to fighter jet sonic boom directly above the airport. People were ducking for cover, running away from windows, trying, crying, screaming. Luckily, the coup failed by early morning, and the airport gradually got workers back. Rebooking all planes and getting people out of the airport was still absolute chaos, just with different type of anxiety, frustration, exhaustion, and annoyance. Taking an overnight ferry during a people-to-people program in the summer with a bunch of high schoolers, overnight from Italy to Sicily, bunch of younger to middle-aged dudes not in the group were constantly hitting on the girls and were trying to proposition them back to their cabins on the ship. A few of us saw some trying to follow us back to our own rooms, and a male teacher had to intervene. Later that night, when in the room with the three other girls, we heard our door being tested to see if locked. I was fully prepared to claw the eyes out of any mother effer who successfully got in, but it was an effing scary, sleepless night. I used to teach English in Japan. I didn't get off most nights until 9 p.m., so it was close to 10 by the time I made it into the train stop near my apartment. One night I'm walking home, and the street is dead except for this elementary school boy walking towards me and whistling. In Japan, whistling at night is said to attract demons, so I was a bit unsettled by his behavior. This kid just kept whistling. I hurried home demon-free. I also used to find long, thick black hair in my apartment in place that I'd recently cleaned. I don't have thick black hair. My hair is fine and red, so that was weird. I also didn't have guests with hair like that, so who knows? When I was in Mexico with a friend, we had a creepy dude tailing us. We're both attractive women, so when we first saw him looking at us, we didn't think much of it. But we then started walking back to our room, had to go through the dark, outdoor spots in the resort, and he started following us. We both sensed something was off, but by that point, he had started following within about 6 feet. It was pitch black, and I didn't know how to avert the obviously dangerous situation. I started saying things like, "Where's the rest of our group? They're taking forever." And I slowed my gait a lot to keep us in at least a little light. When a few other people appeared on the path, a family with young children, we went up to them and said, "We thought you guys got lost." They were bewildered, but let us walk with them. The man literally disappeared once this happened. Keep in mind, I met a pretty savvy woman that doesn't spook easily, but I was chilled to my bones in this situation. When I write it out, it sounds silly, but it was definitely sketchy. It's always good if and when strangers are faced with a situation like that and they just kind of read the tea leaves and your non-verbal communication and body language to say like, okay, these people are in some type of distress. So good for them and good for you as well, recognizing a potential dangerous situation. Could have been coincidence, but could have been worse. Possible sex traffickers in South Africa was in a group that was mostly women, primarily white American with some Canadian mixed in. We were at an African cultural village, watching various tribal dances, Xhosa, Zulu, Swati, etc., when I noticed a group of dudes taking photos of us instead of performers. Thought it was weird, but chalked it up to us being so blatantly American or Canadian, I'm sure we stuck out like a sore thumb. When we ate dinner in the big cafeteria, I noticed them focusing on one woman in particular. Their camera lenses effing zoomed in on this ethnically Israeli woman in our group. I walked up and snapped a shot of the one photographer with my iPod. It was 2013, and I didn't have a smartphone at the time. They really didn't know what to do or how to make of me taking a photo of them. They were all silent. My goal was really to show how rude it was and make them feel as awkward as they made our group feel by staring at them without saying anything. After leaving, they were upset and talking about me or pointing at me, according to a friend. I caught them taking photos of one of the girls, and so I silently confronted and photographed them again. It was really strange, and we told our guide. Our guide was super laid back and just accepted their answer of being Saudis who just wanted to photograph their trip to South Africa. All is well, and I was being paranoid, right? Well, they saw the big-ass tour bus that we left on and followed us out to the cultural village on rural South African backroads for roughly an hour back to our gated hotel. Fortunately, the guards prevented entry to them on the grounds that they did not have a reservation and made them turn around. Really don't want to find out what they had in store for us had they followed us back to our rooms. TL, DR. Saudis picked out the only Israeli girl in our group, took serious close-ups of her with telephoto camera lenses, were confronted by me and got upset, followed us on rural back roads for about an hour, to be turned around and away by guards for not having a reservation at our hotel. I have a friend that's from South Africa. He was going to go back for a bit to visit some family and friends. He invited me along. We stayed with one of his friends who live in a really old colonial house in quite literally the middle of nowhere. This house has a fence around the entire property. We were returning to the house one night. It was very dark. No streetlights or anything. We pulled up to the gate to the property. I was in the passenger seat, so I hopped out to open the gate. As I opened the gate, I thought I heard something run past me, but a bit in the distance. I was a bit spooked, so I quickly closed the gate after the vehicle passed through. When I fully closed it, I heard the same thing run past me, but this time, much closer. I knew I wasn't just hearing things this time. I was absolutely freaked out. Here I was in the middle of nowhere, in a country with plenty of animals that can quite easily tear me apart. At this point, I started running back to the vehicle. As I was running, I heard the same thing run after me, but it was gaining on me. As I reached the door, the thing reached me. This time, I could see it, and it was indeed an animal. It was the house owner's friendly dog, excited to see me. I never felt so relieved in my entire life. I thought for sure I was going to die. I realized that anyway, I typed this out, sounds ridiculous, but here it goes. When I went to China on a work trip, a delegation of teachers, we visited the Great Wall. The Chinese tourists that were also there seemed very eager to take a picture with me, to the point where once I started, they began circling me, waiting for them. I'm an American woman that's relatively tall, 5'11", and I have very blonde hair. After a few pictures, I caught a look from a coworker as the tour group moved on and thought, what the hell am I doing? Then I put my hoodie over my head and said, no more pictures. I'm absolutely certain this is the closest I will ever come to feeling like what celebrities go through, and to be honest, it wasn't that great. When I was 10 years old, I had this weird dream of 2 men and 1 woman in bathing suits. The woman had 1 leg, so she had 1 arm around the guy's shoulders and the other arm around the other man's shoulder, and their backs were facing me. I thought it was a weird dream, but didn't think too much of it. A few months later, I was in El Salvador with my family for spring break. On the second to last day, we went to a water park, and I somehow got separated from my family. I was looking around, and I saw the same 3 people that I had seen in my dreams month prior. The only thing is that there were black bars around them, so I could only see them and nothing else. I didn't talk to them or see their faces. A few years ago, I'm in Saudi Arabia on business. The company's CEO had advised me to use Uber there because it would be easier than talking to a cabbie who probably didn't speak English. At the end of the trip, I get an Uber to head back to the airport. I noticed that the driver blows right past the airport turnoff. It feels like we're heading out into the desert. Pretty quickly, I'm starting to get nervous. I try to ask what is going on, but the guy just looks in the rearview mirror and smiles. A few miles later, he's finally taking a turn into not the airport, but a Saudi Air Force base. He pulls up to the gates, and out come the guards, yelling at him and pointing their weapons. Now, I'm practically crapping my pants in the back seat. What the hell is going on? I'm going to be shot or arrested trying to enter a Saudi base illegally because of an effing Uber driver. The guy eventually backs up and turns around. We get back on the highway, go a few miles, and he turns off again. This time, he chose the entrance for all the highway coaches, buses for people going to Hajj and Mecca. It's Ramadan, and the place is packed with Muslims making the sacred journey. It's another repeat of this idiot getting himself yelled at again for being in the wrong place. At least, this time, the guys doing the yelling are not armed, but still. We're back in the highway again in a few minutes, and for the second time, this guy drives right past the correct airport turnoff. I'm in the back wondering how hard I can punch the CEO in the face without getting fired. For F's sake, now where are we going? He follows the highway into town and does this big arc, and now we're driving parallel to the previous path of chaos, but about 5 or 6 kilometers away. The airport is on my right now. It was to the left previously. This time, he takes the first exit, but I'm not familiar with it. But it's the airport, so I'm not complaining. As we get closer to the terminals, I realize we're on the wrong side of the airport, like domestic flights versus international flights. He needs to reverse his course, drive all the way around to the outside along the big loop. And again, F that. I'm getting out without saying anything. At least I'm at the airport, and maybe there's a shuttle. Nope, no shuttle. There are, however, about 50 cab drivers all offering to take me somewhere. But all they can say is, "You need cab?" That's it. One guy sort of steps forward. I'm asking for someone who speaks English, and he finally brings a young guy around. In addition to saying, "You need cab?" this guy can also say, "No problem, I drive you there." It's progress. I show him my airline ticket, and he realizes right away I'm on the wrong side of the airport. I ask him how much to get to the other side, and he says it will be the equivalent of $50 for a 10-minute ride. Seemed like a better rate than Uber. FWIW, I wrote a complaint to Uber. They reimbursed me immediately. I mean, the last time I was in the Middle East, it was before Uber was really a thing. And what I do remember is that cab drivers are extremely aggressive drivers, and they could take you for a ride. So, but gotta make a living somehow, I guess. Anyway, that was in United Arab Emirates. That's what I'm talking about. I was walking down the street in Shanghai heading to a restaurant. A small Pakistani man passed me going the opposite way, and he mumbled, "Hashish?" I asked, "Pardon me? Hashish?" He asked. I looked around. There were military police right across the street. I bought a tightly packaged, paper-wrapped wad of hash for about $5. It was the best I've ever had. I couldn't smoke it all, so I gave about half to a prostitute. Was in West Berlin during the Cold War. Made friends with the Russian guy. A little known fact is that Russians had access to West Berlin, and the Allies had access to East Berlin. I went to visit him one day, and there were 2 other guys sitting with him who told me he didn't want me to visit anymore. I was young and brash and told them I wanted to hear it from him. That's when one of them leaned forward in his chair and said, "You don't understand. You come again, and you never see mommy or daddy or puppy dog ever again." I believed him and never went back again. Pretty sure I had an encounter with the KGB, who probably feared the corruption influence of an American on their comrade.